A woman like you stands in stark contrast to the conventional, stereotypical image that society often portrays. You don't conform to the easy expectations others have, especially men. You're not the passive or subservient type. You don't sit idly by waiting for life to serve you. You are driven by a purpose, by a sense of self that's powerful, self-sustained, and unapologetic. This in itself can be intimidating. To many men, the idea of facing a woman who is not only independent but also resolutely confident can be a source of great fear. A woman like you demands authenticity, strength, and real engagement. There's no room for pretense or shallow connections, and for many men this level of demand can be terrifying. They might find themselves unsure of how to meet the standard you set, or worse, they fear failing in a way that reveals their deepest insecurities. Men fear you because you force them to confront themselves. You demand that they step up, that they show something real, something worthy of you. Your presence isn't just about your physical appearance, though many men may find that alone intimidating. It's about the energy you project. When you walk into a room, it's as if you carry a weight with you, a presence that commands attention. But this isn't about seeking validation or admiration. It's something deeper, something more profound. You are the embodiment of strength, self-respect, and a quiet, unshakable power. And this power is a threat to many men because it forces them to examine their own weakness or complacency. Many men have been conditioned to believe that power in a relationship must come from them, that they must be the ones who lead, who control, who possess the strength. But when they see a woman like you, they realize that they may not be the one holding the reins. The roles are blurred, and in that blurring, they feel lost, confused, unsure. This uncertainty, this vulnerability, is what frightens them. They fear that a woman like you won't need them the way society tells them they're supposed to be needed. Men are often raised to think that they need to be the protector, the provider, the dominant force in a relationship. But a woman like you isn't searching for a protector. You're searching for a partner, someone who can meet you at your level. Someone who brings as much to the table as you do. This expectation can be overwhelming for some men. When you challenge the traditional power dynamics, you're not only forcing men to rethink their role, but you're also threatening the very foundation of what they believe makes them valuable. In a world that often defines men by their ability to provide or protect, a woman like you shakes that foundation. You make them realize that their worth cannot be reduced to what they can give in material terms or their ability to maintain control. You demand that they offer something deeper: emotional intelligence, vulnerability, respect, and a level of self-awareness that many men haven't had to cultivate. And that can be daunting. Your independence also acts as a mirror. You don't need validation from anyone, especially not from men. And that is the most terrifying part for many. To a man who's used to seeking approval, to constantly prove his worth, a woman who is unapologetically herself without needing to seek anyone's approval can be unnerving. It exposes a deep vulnerability in them, one they may not even be aware of. When a woman doesn't need them to complete her, it forces men to confront their own sense of inadequacy. For too long, many men have been socialized to believe that their worth is defined by what they can offer, by how they can make a woman feel secure. When faced with a woman who doesn't need to be made secure, they're left questioning their purpose in the equation. And that is unsettling. They're faced with their own insecurities, their own fear of not measuring up, not being enough. But it's not just your strength or independence that strikes fear in men, it's also the depth of your emotional capacity. A woman like you doesn't engage in superficial relationships. You seek depth. You seek understanding. You demand connection on an emotional level that few are equipped to handle. Men, traditionally, are not encouraged to explore their emotions deeply, let alone express them freely. They are taught to suppress their feelings, to toughen up, to hide behind bravado. But a woman like you doesn't accept these walls. You push past them, challenging men to be open, to be honest, and to be real. This vulnerability, this demand for raw, unfiltered emotion can be terrifying. For many men, the prospect of being emotionally available means risking rejection, vulnerability, and exposure. It means revealing themselves in ways they were never taught to. And that fear of exposure can be a significant barrier. When you demand more than just a surface-level relationship, you expose the areas that many men are too afraid to show. This kind of emotional depth is both compelling and terrifying. What's also fear-inducing for many men is the power you hold over their ability to truly be themselves. When you're with someone who is as self-aware as you, they can no longer hide behind the facades they have built over the years. They can no longer rely on being the tough, unemotional figure who can simply control the narrative. They must confront themselves, acknowledge their flaws, and deal with their internal contradictions. This forces a man to face his own weaknesses, his insecurities, and his emotional baggage. And for a lot of men, this kind of confrontation is something they avoid at all costs. It's easier to maintain a distance, to engage in relationships where emotional depth is kept at arm's length, where vulnerability is not required. But when they meet a woman like you, that option is no longer available. They are forced to take an honest look at themselves, and for many, this level of self-examination is terrifying. The other element of fear comes from the realization that with a woman like you, nothing is certain. Relationships with women who rely on men for validation, who seek their approval, tend to be predictable. The dynamics are set. But with a woman like you, there's a level of unpredictability, a refusal to conform to the norms that destabilizes the traditional power structures in a relationship. Men may fear that they can't control or predict what you will do or how you will behave. This unpredictability can be both exciting and terrifying. For a man who is used to being the one in control, the one who calls the shots, the idea that his partner might not always conform to his expectations can be unsettling. There's a fear of losing control, of being swept up in the unpredictability of someone who is fully autonomous and self-sufficient. This autonomy, this refusal to be tethered by anyone's expectations, creates an environment of uncertainty, and uncertainty, as we know, is a powerful force. What a woman like you represents is the dismantling of the illusion of control that many men have come to rely on. In a relationship with you, they cannot lean on traditional gender roles, nor can they use their status or power to manipulate or control the situation. You force them to deal with the reality that relationships are not about control, but about mutual respect, vulnerability, and shared emotional growth. This is a frightening realization for many men, particularly those who have not been taught how to navigate relationships with women on equal terms. They are faced with the prospect of having to negotiate their emotional landscape without the usual crutches of power and dominance. What men fear the most about a woman like you is not necessarily your beauty, your intelligence, or your strength. It's the fact that you demand an authenticity that they are often not prepared to offer. You demand honesty in ways that leave no room for games, for deception, for pretending to be someone they're not. And in a world where so many men have learned to wear masks, to present a version of themselves that they think will be accepted, this demand for honesty is a challenge they are often unprepared to face. You force them to be real, to strip away the facades, to show up as their true selves. This vulnerability, this exposure, is something many men fear more than anything. It forces them to let go of the false versions of themselves they've spent so long building, and in its place they must confront who they truly are. For many, that's a terrifying prospect. The very essence of your being challenges the notion that a man must always be the provider of strength, of leadership, of answers. When a man encounters a woman like you, they are forced to reckon with the idea that both partners in a relationship can hold equal power, equal voice, and equal responsibility. This idea is not just a challenge to traditional gender roles, but it also forces men to reconsider their entire understanding of what it means to be in a partnership. It's easy to cling to the idea that one person, usually the man, must be the dominant force, but a woman like you doesn't settle for that. You refuse to play into the game of power dynamics, and instead, you ask for a partnership based on mutual respect, shared understanding, and equal contribution. For many men, this is a foreign concept. It's easier to retreat into the comfort of outdated stereotypes where their role is clear and defined. But with you, that clarity is lost, and in its place, they must learn to share, to compromise, and to communicate in ways they may not have practiced before. This uncertainty, this vulnerability of not being in control, is deeply unsettling. When men meet women like you, they are also confronted with the stark contrast between who they are and who they could be. You show them the possibility of a life lived with purpose, with clarity, and with a sense of personal integrity that they may not have developed within themselves. For many, the idea of confronting their own inadequacies or unrealized potential is deeply uncomfortable. Men often fear a woman like you because she holds up a mirror to their own lives and forces them to look at what they have settled for. She challenges them to grow, to evolve, to become more than what they are. But growth requires change, and change requires confronting discomfort. For a man who has grown accustomed to a life of complacency or self-deception, the idea of change can be terrifying. You represent the possibility of something more, and that prospect forces them to face the very things they have been avoiding: their own stagnation, their lack of fulfillment, and the realization that they have not yet become the person they could be. Another facet of why men fear a woman like you lies in the stark contrast between the expectations society has placed on them and what you actually require. Society teaches men that their worth is tied to their ability to provide material wealth, physical strength, and social status. These attributes are often seen as the defining qualities of a man's value in a relationship. But a woman like you doesn't subscribe to these superficial metrics of success. You want a partner who is capable of emotional depth, intellectual engagement, and shared vulnerability. For many men, this is a completely different way of thinking. They may have spent their entire lives believing that their success in life and love is measured by their job title, their financial status, or their physical prowess. But when faced with someone like you, they quickly realize that these external markers mean little if they don't have the emotional intelligence, the self-awareness, and the empathy to truly connect. This realization can be a hard pill to swallow, as it requires them to discard the shallow metrics of self-worth they have held onto for so long and confront a new, more meaningful way of being. Your independence serves as a reminder that men don't have to be the sole providers in a relationship. For a man who has internalized the idea that he must always be the one who takes care of his partner, the very idea that a woman like you is self-sufficient can feel like a challenge to his masculinity. The fear here isn't necessarily rooted in a desire to control, but in a deeper sense of vulnerability, a fear that if he doesn't offer something of tangible value, his place in the relationship might be questioned. But in truth, you don't need him to provide for you in a material sense. You need him to show up emotionally, to engage with you on a deeper level, and to contribute to the relationship in ways that are beyond the physical. This shifts the foundation of traditional relationships, and for many men, it can be a difficult adjustment. The fear that they are not enough, that they cannot provide what you truly need, is a source of great anxiety. But in reality, you're not asking for them to fulfill some idealized role of the perfect man. You're asking for authenticity, for vulnerability, and for the kind of honesty that can lead to a deeper connection. That's a demand that many men are not prepared for. The fear that arises when men encounter a woman like you also stems from the unpredictability of emotions in relationships. You don't follow a script. There is no formula for how to engage with you. This unpredictability shakes men to their core. They've been trained, often from an early age, to anticipate the needs and wants of women through carefully learned behaviors and societal cues. But when they meet someone who doesn't fit into those well-defined expectations, someone who is unapologetically herself, it creates a level of uncertainty that many men find difficult to navigate. You don't play by the rules, and in doing so, you challenge everything they thought they knew about love, partnership, and connection. For a man who has built his understanding of relationships on the idea that he must understand and control the dynamics, the unknown is terrifying. And yet, that is exactly what you bring to the table: the unknown, the unexplored, and the thrilling possibility of real, uncharted connection. What men fear most is the prospect of being vulnerable with someone who expects them to rise to their highest potential. With a woman like you, the challenge is clear: you're not interested in the man they are now, you're interested in the man they could become. This is a terrifying thought because it implies that the present self, the comfortable self, the self that has not yet grown, is not enough. You push men to step into a higher version of themselves, and in doing so, you require that they confront the reality of their own limitations. You are not interested in the half version of a man who hides behind excuses, who is content with mediocrity, who fears growth. You expect more. You demand more. And the fear that arises from that demand is a fear of self-exposure, a fear of showing their weaknesses, a fear of acknowledging that they have not yet reached the person they could be. This fear is compounded by the reality that many men have never had to confront these challenges before. They've been taught to avoid vulnerability, to avoid showing weakness, and to avoid facing the full scope of their potential. But when they meet a woman like you, they are forced to face the uncomfortable truth that growth requires struggle, that success requires vulnerability, and that the relationship they desire is built on the foundation of mutual growth and shared authenticity. The fear of being exposed, of being asked to be something more, is a significant source of anxiety for many men. They fear that they will fail, that they will fall short, and that they will not be able to meet the high standards you set. But in truth, what you are asking for is not perfection, but an ongoing commitment to growth, to self-awareness, and to mutual respect. You challenge them not because you want to tear them down, but because you believe in their potential to rise to the occasion. And that belief, that demand for growth, is both empowering and terrifying. A woman like you also demands a level of respect and integrity that forces men to question their own capacity for honesty. For many, the idea of living authentically and without pretense is not one that has been nurtured. Instead, men have often been taught that vulnerability and transparency are weaknesses, that opening up too much to a partner will leave them exposed and susceptible to harm. But you ask for exactly that vulnerability and transparency, not as a means of manipulation or control, but as a way of deepening connection and mutual understanding. And this request is frightening because it requires men to step into a space of discomfort, a space where they must relinquish their carefully constructed defenses and trust that their partner will not take advantage of their openness. For men who have been taught to guard their emotions, to maintain a distance, this demand can feel like an insurmountable obstacle. They fear that in exposing their true selves, they might lose control of the relationship, or worse, they might be judged or rejected for their flaws. But in truth, this is not about perfection, it's about showing up with honesty, integrity, and a willingness to be vulnerable. And that is a lesson that many men are reluctant to learn. The fear of inadequacy often emerges in relationships with a woman like you, because you raise the bar so high. You do not settle for mediocrity. You require that the people in your life, particularly your partner, meet you where you are emotionally, intellectually, and spiritually. This demand for equal partnership can be intimidating because it forces men to confront the parts of themselves they've avoided. Many men have been raised with the idea that relationships are transactional, that love and respect are earned through material success, power, and dominance. But with you, none of these superficial traits matter. What matters is a deeper alignment of values, goals, and emotional maturity. You are not interested in a man who merely looks good on paper or one who can provide financial security. You want someone who is emotionally present, who is capable of understanding and respecting your boundaries, and who can communicate openly and honestly. This expectation can be overwhelming for some men, especially those who have never had to cultivate these qualities. The fear of falling short of these expectations is a constant source of anxiety. There's also the fear of being left behind. In a world where growth is often tied to financial success, social status, and power dynamics, you are a reminder that true growth requires more than just external achievements. It requires internal work, self-reflection, emotional intelligence, and a willingness to confront one's flaws and limitations. A woman like you challenges men to keep evolving, to continue developing not only their careers but also their emotional and spiritual lives. This demand for continuous growth is something many men fear, particularly if they feel that they have not yet reached their full potential. The idea that a woman might outgrow them, that she might progress beyond them emotionally or intellectually, is a constant source of insecurity. Men fear that in their complacency they will be left behind, discarded as their partner moves forward in life, finding someone who can keep up with her own evolution. This fear of being outpaced is compounded by the societal expectation that men must always be the ones to lead the relationship, to provide stability and security. When a woman like you refuses to fit into these traditional molds, men are faced with the uncomfortable reality that their own growth may not be keeping pace with yours. What also creates fear in men when they encounter a woman like you is the realization that love is not something that can be won through external gestures or superficial acts. Many men are taught that love is about grand romantic gestures, buying gifts, or providing material security. But you teach them that love is about something much deeper: commitment, respect, and the willingness to show up consistently. You are not interested in the hollow promises that many men often make to win someone's affection. Instead, you want a partner who is consistent, who puts in the effort not just when it's convenient, but when it's difficult, when the relationship faces challenges. This requirement strips away the easy answers, the quick fixes, and the temporary solutions. For many men, the idea of showing up day after day with the same level of commitment and emotional investment is a daunting one. They fear that they will fall short of your expectations, that they will not be able to maintain the level of effort that is required to truly nurture the relationship. This fear of failure, of not being able to meet the demands of the relationship, can be overwhelming. It forces them to face the uncomfortable truth that love is not something that can be bought or won through material means. It requires ongoing emotional labor, authenticity, and a willingness to grow alongside your partner. There is also the fear that with a woman like you, the stakes are higher. The investment required in a relationship with someone who is as self-assured and independent as you is significant. Men fear that by opening themselves up to you, they are taking a risk they may not be ready for. The risk of rejection, the risk of failure, the risk of exposing their deepest vulnerabilities, all of these weigh heavily on their minds. They fear that if they do not meet your standards, if they do not rise to the challenge you present, they will be discarded. And this fear of rejection, particularly from someone who represents a higher standard of emotional maturity and self-awareness, can be paralyzing. For many men, the idea that they might not be able to measure up to your expectations is a source of deep anxiety. They may feel that if they fail, they will not only lose you, but also lose their sense of self-worth. This fear of rejection is compounded by the societal pressure to always succeed, to always be in control, and to always be the one who holds power in the relationship. But with a woman like you, the power dynamics are different. You do not need them to be in control, and that uncertainty is both freeing and terrifying. It requires them to relinquish their need for control and to trust that the relationship will thrive based on mutual respect, emotional depth, and shared growth. A woman like you is a reflection of everything that many men desire but are afraid to confront within themselves. You are the embodiment of emotional independence, self-respect, and the courage to be authentic in all aspects of life. And while many men may find this type of woman attractive, they also fear her because she represents the challenge to grow, to evolve, and to step into the person they have always been capable of becoming. This fear is not about you, but about the work they must do on themselves to meet you on equal footing. You demand nothing less than their best, their truest selves, and for many men that is a demand they are not ready to fulfill. This fear is also rooted in a deeper insecurity, the fear of losing themselves in the pursuit of a relationship. Men who encounter a woman like you are forced to confront the reality that love is not a one-way street, not something that merely exists for them to take, but something that requires mutual effort, sacrifice, and transformation. Many men fear that in a relationship with a woman like you, they will lose their sense of individuality, that they will have to compromise too much of themselves to accommodate your needs, desires, and expectations. They worry that they might disappear into the relationship, becoming so enmeshed with you that they lose touch with their own identity. This fear is particularly pronounced for men who have spent much of their lives prioritizing their personal goals and ambitions over relationships. The idea of sharing their life so fully, so completely with someone else is daunting because it demands that they give up the illusion of total control over their personal journey. But the truth is that real relationships do not erase the self, they enhance it. A woman like you asks them to show up fully, not just as a partner, but as a person who continues to evolve, to pursue their passions, to maintain their individuality, while also fostering a connection that deepens with each passing day. Yet, paradoxically, a woman like you also forces men to confront the stark reality that love is not about winning or achieving, it's about vulnerability, understanding, and compromise. Men often grow up believing that they must earn love through external achievements, through the accumulation of status and wealth, or by fulfilling certain traditional roles. But with you, love is not about impressing or conquering, it's about creating an environment where both partners can be their most authentic selves. This unspoken rule challenges many men to reconsider their approach to love. They fear that in trying to meet the external expectations of what it means to be a man, they will miss the deeper, more meaningful aspects of a relationship: emotional intimacy, trust, and the connection that comes from shared experiences. This realization often causes anxiety because it requires them to let go of their old, familiar ways of thinking and behaving. They must unlearn the habits and assumptions they've held for so long in order to embrace a more authentic, vulnerable way of relating to their partner. For many, this unlearning process can be painful, and the fear of doing it wrong, of not being enough, can be overwhelming. Another reason men fear a woman like you is because you demand accountability not just from them, but from yourself as well. You are not the type of woman who will tolerate excuses or avoidance. When problems arise in a relationship, you confront them head on, and you expect your partner to do the same. This expectation of accountability can be intimidating because it means that no one in the relationship gets to hide from the truth, to avoid difficult conversations, or to pass the blame onto someone else. For men who have grown up in environments where confrontation is avoided or where they were taught to suppress their emotions, this level of honesty can be uncomfortable, even terrifying. They fear that in facing these challenges, they might not be able to measure up, that they might be exposed as inadequate or incapable of handling the difficulties that arise in a deep, meaningful relationship. But the reality is that accountability is what fosters growth, what strengthens bonds, and what builds a partnership based on trust. You do not shy away from difficult conversations, and in this, you challenge your partner to grow, to become a better version of themselves. And while this is a powerful and ultimately empowering force, it's also something that men who have never experienced it before find intimidating. The fear of being emotionally exposed is another reason men may be afraid of a woman like you. Many men have been conditioned to view emotions as a weakness, as something to be suppressed or hidden from the world. They've been taught that to be strong, to be a man, they must avoid showing vulnerability, whether it's through sadness, fear, or even joy. But when they meet a woman like you, they realize that vulnerability is not weakness, it is strength. You understand the importance of being emotionally open and expect the same from your partner. This expectation forces men to face their own emotional limitations, to confront the fear that comes with being vulnerable, and to embrace the idea that true intimacy is built on openness, trust, and emotional honesty. For many men, this idea is foreign, even frightening. They fear that by showing their true emotions, they will expose themselves to rejection, judgment, or ridicule. But in reality, a woman like you is not interested in perfection. She is interested in the raw, unfiltered truth of who you are. This willingness to embrace vulnerability can be a source of strength for both partners, but it requires men to step into a space of discomfort, one that many are unwilling to enter. The fear of being judged for their past mistakes is a constant companion for many men when they are with someone as discerning and self-assured as you. Everyone has a past, and for men there may be things they are not proud of, decisions they regret, relationships that ended poorly, mistakes they've made. When faced with a woman like you, they fear that their past will be held against them, that they will be judged for things they can no longer change. This fear often stems from a lack of self-acceptance, an inability to reconcile their past actions with their present self. But the truth is that you are not interested in their past as a way to judge them. You are interested in how they have grown, how they have learned from their mistakes, and whether they are capable of evolving into a better version of themselves. This focus on growth rather than perfection is a liberating force. However, it's also something that many men find difficult to accept because it forces them to face the parts of themselves they have tried to hide or ignore. The fear of judgment, of being rejected because of past mistakes, keeps many men from fully embracing the opportunities for growth that relationships with someone like you provide. Another reason men fear women like you is because you represent a force of change, and change is always accompanied by uncertainty. Many men are creatures of habit, and they seek comfort in the familiar, in routines, in predictability. But a woman like you brings unpredictability. You are a catalyst for change, pushing your partner to step outside their comfort zone. to embrace new ideas, new experiences, and new ways of thinking. This constant push for growth, while ultimately rewarding, can be exhausting and intimidating. Men fear that they will be unable to keep up with the changes, that they will falter along the way, or that they will lose themselves in the process. Yet, in embracing change, they are presented with an opportunity to become better, more resilient versions of themselves. The fear of this transformation, the fear of change itself, often prevents men from fully engaging with a woman like you. But true growth, whether in a relationship or in life, is impossible without change. And it is through embracing the unknown, through stepping into discomfort, that both partners can grow stronger, more unified, and more capable of facing the challenges that lie ahead.